Next, we have today's final speaker to bring us the state perspective, which we've talked a little bit about today, but we'll talk about it more. Please join me in welcoming Paul Pinsky, Director of the Maryland Energy Administration. Hey, Paul, please take a seat. Governor Westmore appointed you.
Yep.
You served in the state Senate. What are the governor's goals in Maryland, and how does it work too with federal policymaking with the IRA and what states like Maryland are doing?
That's a big question.
Yes, it is.
The governor's called for 100% clean energy by 2035.
Okay.
And if you couple that with the Climate Solutions Now Act that the legislature passed about 18 or 20 months ago, which I had the honor of sponsoring,
right.
It calls for reducing greenhouse gases by 60% by 2031.
Okay.
So put together, the more clean energy, the easier it'll be to reduce greenhouse gases. So there's sort of a symbiotic situation there. And as the sponsor of the Climate Solutions Bill, it was sort of an honor for me to be asked by the governor to try to help implement it along with the Department of the Environment. Look, the IRA has been very helpful. Two of the formula grants we'll be receiving are about $135 million
okay.
Over 4 years. There are other competitive grants we haven't heard about yet. Solar for All, our state green bank has applied for that. So there are a number of things in play. Now, it's unclear when actually the money will flow. They're still setting guidelines
Sure.
at the Department of Energy. But we're going to use that money to increase energy efficiency and to electrify. We think there's a big future in heat pumps, moving away from gas and oil in some cases, and particularly using a Justice 40 lens. The impoverished communities, those that have been overburdened and underserved for many years in our state, mostly black and brown communities. Mm-hmm. And that was not a lens that was used previously to this administration. So we are very committed to all of our projects, whether it's federal money or state money, and we give out about $100 million a year through the MEA, my agency, and we are making sure that the investments go to those communities as well.
Do you talk to other states? Do you learn from other states?
Yeah, but look, it's an uneven situation. Some states are here, some are
right.
here,
yes.
Some are ignoring the whole situation, unfortunately. But look, there are states, Massachusetts, California, New York, that have done great work. Mm-hmm. And we would like to be in the forefront. It's for others to judge where we are.
Now, as I mentioned, you served, the lead sponsor. How did serving in the state Senate help you in your post now?
Well, I served in the legislature for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
We're a part-time legislature.
Right.
So I felt for me personally, it was time to go from legislating to implementing, to be a little more accountable.
Right.
Some people say, you can run wild when you're a legislator. You can demand anything, and it may or may not happen.
But you're right, the implementation doesn't get the attention it deserves.
No, for sure.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
We've gotten headlines. I've gotten headlines for years. It's okay.
Right.
Look, it took us 2.5 years to pass the Climate Solutions Now Act, and it was one of the leading pieces of legislation in the country. It calls for large buildings to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2030 and fully by 2040. So it's called BEPS, Building Energy Performance Standards. And look, is there some pushback? Of course there's pushback. People aren't quite ready to do it. And the Department of the Environment that's actually developing the plan for implementing the climate solutions, which should be released in the next week to 10 days, it's going to have ramifications for the whole state in every sector. It's not going to be an easy lift.
Okay.
It's not going to be an easy lift to reach the 60%. It's not going to be an easy lift to reach the governor's goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. Unfortunately, where we thought there were tailwinds, they're now turning into headwinds at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you think of what came out of COP28?
Cautiously optimistic. I personally would have liked a stronger solution.
You're not alone.
No, I know that,
Right.
and I have to temper some of my comments.
Right.
Yeah, look, The energy sector is very powerful. They had apparently thousands of representatives there. And the Mideast has their own interests.
Right.
They want to keep the oil flowing. It's a conflict, and how quickly we move. I heard Senator Markey. It's a matter of speed. What does that transition look like? How long will it take? How many people are going to drag their feet? At what point do we have to say, you got to do it? We're trying to move in Maryland to say, we'd like you to do it voluntarily, but if we have to say it's going to be done by 2030, like the greenhouse gas reductions, it's got to be done.
Right.
We have to put fossil fuel aside. We have to move towards electrification. We have to move towards heat pumps. We got to grow solar. We need to grow offshore wind, although there have been some challenges along the East Coast in the recent months. So, look, there's momentum, but there's also some pushback. And I think that's exactly what we saw in the Middle East. Look, islands are being lost. I mean, it's true. And some Western European countries have moved significantly. Obviously they have not been. They've moved away from gas for a long time because it's expensive. And a gallon of gas has always been expensive there.
Right.
So. Look, it's a challenge,
Sure.
But we in Maryland want to try to implement it in a very concrete way. And I think that's one of the focus. And we work with the Department of the Environment. We're Energy Administration. We're in the same building. Okay. Our offices are down the hall. They're much larger. But we got to be aggressive. That's all there is to it. And if we have to push, we have to push. It's just, it's not a time for dragging our feet.
What is the role, and maybe you can speak to this over the years, of how you've seen technology come and where it's going, but the role of whether it's AI or new technology in helping policymakers achieve their goals?
No, that's a very important point. Solar is a perfect example. It was very expensive. You had to buy it from Asia, but prices come down pretty significantly.
After some time, yes.
But it's taken 30 years for that price to come down. Electric vehicles is another example. The cost of an electric vehicle has actually come down pretty significantly. Mm-hmm. Still a little bit more, so now we're stuck with a question of infrastructure. And one of our goals has been to make sure the infrastructure to be able to battery up is not just in detached suburban homes, but we have to look at the city and multifamily units, apartment buildings. Is the infrastructure there? I mean, in other words, the cost has come down where it's actually affordable for working families, for some of the smaller cars.
Right.
But do they have the infrastructure to want to buy it? So in other words, are there enough chargers and parking at apartment buildings in West Baltimore, for example? We know the last 10 years have seen greater sales in the middle class and the upper middle class, primarily the white communities. Mm-hmm. And in their suburban homes, they will do the upgrades, where they can have a level 2 in their garage. But that's just not in place yet for a lot of our poorer communities. So again, it's using that Justice 40 equity lens in our work. So look, there's more work to be done. Solar has come forward. Turbines have come forward, but unfortunately, international financing, availability of ships to do it has slowed it down. We saw what Ørsted did pulling out of New Jersey. We have a commitment from them, goes back a few years. We hope they complete their commitment and investment, but there are a couple of states where it's up in the air, and things have slowed. Dominion and Virginia's moving ahead. But there are other things on the future agenda. Storage is clearly a key area. Only being able to store energy for 4 hours, it's just not enough. Mm-hmm. But there are exciting things happening. We funded a number of schools in the state of Maryland where we got them from scratch. We got an architect, and they're net zero. In other words, before they were built under the soccer field, they put geothermal. In the building, they used heat pumps instead of gas or oil, and they also used solar. So here's a school that is actually generating more energy than they're utilizing. And the marginal cost was not that large. and I think people have to think proactively, before they put that shovel in the ground.
Yeah, and that was the question I was going to ask you. What are the arguments that, as you know, this debate has moved significantly?
Yes.
At one point, people were disputing that the Earth was getting warmer and that it wasn't man-made. Okay, by and large, we moved beyond that.
We sort of have. I was on a panel last week where a national figure actually put a slide deck where it was basically a denier presentation, and this is in December of 2023.
But the role of stakeholders, and when you mention a school where they make reforms, energy reforms basically, is that where you're able to convince, some people you're never going to be able to convince, obviously, the energy industry, and but some you can, and what are the most convincing arguments? Is it examples like that to say, listen, if you invest this, it's going to lead to this, we've proven it?
Well, we in fact have committed, at least on a modest scale, to pay the marginal cost. So it's not even an additional cost to the money they would spend on building the school anyway.
It's less.
Some of my former colleagues have introduced legislation mandating it, requiring any new school must be net zero.
Okay.
So, and that, Maryland's been progressive in that sense. Now, it hasn't passed, and we are now talking to the 24 superintendents saying, look, we have money, you have a project, we'll pay the marginal difference. We'll pay the money to put solar on your roofs if you're putting in a new roof. So there's got to, look, incentives and doing it voluntarily is preferable. But just like, we did with the Climate Solutions Bill, sometimes you have to say enough's enough. This is how it's going to be done. Mm-hmm. And then we found, if you say we want a green school, the architects will design to that. And when they put their plans to the builders will build to that, and it gets done. Right. It's doing it the first time that's always the challenge, moving out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Once you've done it another way, it's going to speed up, just rapidly, as we can see. It's just people are stuck in the old way of doing things, in many sectors. And we have to sort of move them out of the comfort zone. And once they get out of the comfort zone, and if it's not additional revenue during a tight time when they can barely fund schools or education, police, whatever, if money's not an issue, they need the nudge to take the next step. And we're trying to do it gently in Maryland or by mandate.
Got about a minute left, but you mentioned Senator Markey saying we're going to make progress. It just depends on how quickly we make progress. If we don't make progress quickly enough, what are the ramifications?
I used the example in the Middle Ages when you had the bubonic plague, and they were pulling bodies from houses. Okay. If that were the case today, we'd be moving like that. Right. But it's much more subtle, climate change, a storm here, a flooding here, and it's not like people are in a wake-up mode of, my God, we have to do something today. Right. It's just more nuanced. To many scientists, it's not so nuanced. Whether it's fires, whether it's flooding, severe storms, we read about it every day. It's becoming a common day occurrence. So that's one of the challenges, is convincing people it's going to affect all of you, not just in terms of physical health, but economically. Sure. When a state stops writing insurance for floods, whether North Carolina or Florida, that's affecting the economy. So
that didn't used to happen. That's a relatively new phenomenon.
And I think we're going to see more of those examples. Yeah. I think it's just emblematic of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul, thanks for joining us so much.
My pleasure.
Please thank Paul for joining us this morning. Thank you. Let's hand it back to Sarah.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you to all of the wonderful speakers this morning. And on behalf of The Hill and our sponsor, Samsung, we'd like to thank everyone who joined us here and online. If you missed any portion of today's discussion, the full event video is available on thehill.com. Additionally, our friends at Samsung, in the back of the room by the coffee bar, they'll be demoing their SmartThings app, their energy-efficient SmartThings app. There's also a lot of fun things to take a look at in this room as well. So please enjoy yourself. Thank you.